Dr. Axe, welcome to the show. I just want to start by saying that this is very surreal and special for me because you were truly one of the very first influential people that I ever followed in the health space about 15 or so years ago when my mom was first diagnosed with breast cancer. So it's truly an honor to have you here and be speaking with you today.
Well, Jacqueline, thanks for having me. It's an honor for me to be here as well.
So, to start, Dr. Axe, most people know you from your expertise in the holistic health and wellness space, but I absolutely love the transition that you've made into the growth and mindset space. In fact, your new podcast, The Dr. Josh Axe Show, is among my top favorites to listen to. You just share so much truth on your show, biblical truth that many people sadly are just scared today to vocalize, but truth that we really need to hear in the world today. So I just wanted to thank you for everything that you've been putting out there over the past several months. It's really had a positive impact on my life, and I know as many others as well. But I know you experienced a pretty serious back injury not too long ago, and I can't help but wonder, was that a primary driver of your shift to now focusing on the mindset space?
It was a big part of it. Even on my show now, it's the Dr. Josh Axe Show, and I do cover, as you said, a lot of things related how to grow. And so specifically, I focus on personal growth. I also focus on health and wellness and food as medicine and those sort of things. And I also focus on spiritual growth. And so what I discovered is that I've worked with tens of thousands of patients in functional medicine and helping them overcome a lot of different health issues. And I really think the biggest area people need to heal right now is their mind and their spirit. And so, a lot of times people know what they should be doing, but they don't do it right. And so I think a lot of times that has to do with our mind. And I think that also right now, when you look at medical conditions today, cancer, when I first opened up my functional medicine practice, and that was probably 15 plus years ago, but when that happened, actually it was longer than that. Anyways, it's been a while. So I'm sorry, I'm doing the math now. It was like 17, 18 years ago. But all that being said, it used to be cancer, heart disease, diabetes. That was on the rise. Well, recently, the past 7 years, what's dwarfed those conditions has been mental health issues. And it goes far beyond that. I think today everybody wants to, maximize their life. And I think that a lot of times people aren't able to do that for various reasons. And so I help them do that on my podcast and show. But one of the things that I am, really conscious of as I was writing my newest book called Think This, Not That, is the importance of mindset. Now, here's the crazy part. I decided that I wanted to write a book on the mind-body connection. How do we heal ourselves with the power of our mind? And also, how do we grow and to live our best life possible? And when I set out to write this book, something crazy happened. I ended up almost dying. And that might sound, that's not an exaggeration. So I went in and I'd injured my back lifting weights and ended up having some pain that just hadn't fully gone away after a few years. And so I decided to go in and get something called stem cell done. Okay. And that's where they take your own bone marrow, they concentrate the stem cells, inject it back in. And after that one using my own healing factors, I probably got about 60 to 70% better. And I thought, okay, I'm going to get this done one more time because I just had a little bit of nagging injury, but I was probably back 85%. Okay. 90%, almost no pain. But I thought I'm going to get this done one more time. I got it injected again. And then I felt worse, and then worse and worse and worse. Chronic pain, had to put on a back brace. It was so bad. And finally, I get 3 months later and I woke up one morning. The pain was so bad I couldn't even walk. I mean, I literally couldn't even move out of bed. Had to call an ambulance. They had to come pick me up. My wife and family and I were in Puerto Rico at the time. They drive me to get an MRI. I get an MRI. And when I get the results back, it said I have a spinal infection in my disc. It had gotten to my bone, and then it was by my spinal cord. Mm-hmm. And if anybody knows, if you have a bacterial infection and it's about to get in your, it's right by your spinal cord, it can be very serious. And so I had to take a medical flight on a jet to Florida, sit down with an infectious disease specialist. And he said, Josh, listen, he said, this is a really serious infection. It's in your bone. It's called osteomyelitis in your L5 vertebra. and now there's an abscess that's in your spinal canal by your spinal cord. And so this infection is spread. And he said, your best case prognosis is you're going to have chronic pain the rest of your life, and you'll be the first person to know when there's bad weather coming through. He said, the worst case scenario, the reality is this could kill you. And also, there's a really good chance you're going to be permanently disabled. Now, this was a year and 9 months ago. And I had just gone months before to throwing my 2-year-old daughter up in the air in the pool, doing squats and deadlifts, running and cycling and swimming, being in fantastic shape. And to be told by this doctor that the most likely scenario for me was I was going to be permanently disabled was really, really hard to take. And I had about 48 hours where I just felt distraught. There's emotions I'd never experienced before, Jacqueline, like despair and hopelessness. And if anybody's ever had something like this in their life and you're kind of wondering, how am I ever going to get through this? Yep. And for myself, I really had to turn to my faith and turn to God and just prayed. And I felt like God said, you're not focusing on the right things. Focus on me. Yep. And so I realized, you know what? I'd spent so much time focusing on the diagnosis. For the last 48 hours, I was on the internet researching. I'm a researcher. That's a big part of what I do, reading the studies and reading, okay, what are the prognoses of somebody who has this level of infection? Well, it didn't make the matter. It didn't make me feel any better. It actually made things seem worse because all the people who had something like this, and some of them had to have rods in their spine because of the level it was at. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to fix my eyes on God, and I'm going to just do everything I can in my power. It's like this old, the old saying is, get on your knees and pray, then get on your feet and work. Well, I couldn't get on my feet and work, but I could pray, and I could eat as healthy as I could, and I could do everything within my own power. Now, I had not taken a medication since I was in high school, for the most part. Okay. And the physician said, you need to be on antibiotics on an IV for 6 weeks and then a pill for another 6. So you need to be on antibiotics for 3 months. That's how serious this infection is. And I realized that's going to be very hard on my gut microbiome. Now, my first priority was healing my spine, but I also realized I wanted to do it in a way where I maximized my healing and also minimized the damage to my body. And so I went and I was doing research and read this study on hyperbaric chambers and how they can reduce the time that you need to be on an antibiotic, because when you drive oxygen deep into your cells and tissues, it acts as an antibiotic itself and actually amplifies the antibiotic. And so I said, okay. And I went and I got in a hyperbaric chamber every day for 2 hours, a hard chamber. Wow. And then I also got IVs of things like silver and methylene blue and all kinds of things. And then I ate perfectly. The only thing I ate was meat and vegetables, spent daily time in prayer and visualization. And I did take the antibiotic IV, but I only had to do it for 4 weeks. And I went through this whole process. And after a couple weeks, I started feeling a little better, and then a little better, a little better. Now, this wasn't overnight. One of the issues with this area of the body is it gets almost no blood supply. So it heals. It takes about 10 times longer to heal. So I didn't walk for an entire year. Well, let me say this. I didn't walk for 10 months, and then I was on a walker for 2 months. This time last year, I was on a walker. I had just gotten on a walker. And so
Chelsea was pregnant, right? During this time, your wife was pregnant?
No, she got pregnant later on.
Okay.
Yeah, she got pregnant later on. But we just had our second child. Yeah.
Right.
It was just
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. So anyways, to kind of sum this up is that I continue to heal. Now I'm about 80%. I'm not 100% yet, but I think I will be this year for sure. I'm back lifting weights. I'm back carrying my daughter. I'm back doing everything for the most part I want to do. I do want to run, and I haven't tried that yet, but I think I'm pretty close to being back doing that. And so anyways, I'm already way better than the best case scenario prognosis. And so, as I was in bed for a year, I said I wanted to write a book that have the most important life altering principles in them that I think are truly going to change someone's life for the better. And these are principles that'll bring health to your body, but I think it'll also help you find your purpose. It'll help you overcome limiting beliefs. It'll help you experience a breakthrough in your relationships and fulfilling your dreams and those things that you really want to do. And so that was a really big part of the book, is I feel like God gave me the opportunity during that time to write in a way and put things in the book I never would have put in there, and because I had so much time to be able to think and work on it, reflect. And so Yeah, I'm very, very excited about it. Hit the New York Times bestseller list first week out. And so, yeah, the book's called Think This, Not That. So that's something that, of course, I am, excited to share.
That's incredible. I have it here with me right now, Dr. Axe, and you're going to laugh. I actually pre-ordered it on January 1st of this year before I even knew I'd be having you on the show.
Oh,
So
wow.
you can imagine how excited I was for our conversation. But I mean, what an incredible story. So many things to say in response to that. One thing that came to mind is I had a conversation not too long ago on my podcast with my dad's sister, who is like a second mom to me. And she's just been an incredible spiritual mentor. And she's always told me, especially over the past 5-6 years with my mom's cancer journey, she's like, you have to focus or differentiate between fact versus truth, right? So a doctor can give you a PET scan report. That's a fact, whatever that says. The truth is that your mom is healed. Jesus says she is already healed. And that really
Yeah.
changed the perspective at which I viewed everything. And I always tell my mom, whenever we see your oncologist, take what he says with a grain of salt. Prognosis is not
Yeah.
truth, it's a fact. And just again, repeat those healing affirmations over yourself and the power of your mind. Well, first of all, Jesus heals, but the power of your mindset is so strong it surpasses any medication. And we see all these studies coming out now of patients who, are given placebos and they heal. They experience radical remission. Kelly Turner wrote an incredible book on it. So just amen to all of that. And I'm very passionate about this area of work as well. And another thing that came to mind, Dr. Axe, so kind of similar to your case, although not as severe, my mom actually had a prophylactic kyphoplasty surgery back in 2021. Long story short, she should not have had it done, but we can't go back in time. We learn from our experiences. But following that surgery, so many doctors also said that this is going to be a chronic issue. She might have to have a laminectomy, other type of surgical procedures. And we just stood on the word of God and we prayed and again did a lot of natural things, infrared sauna. I got her a PEMF mat, changed her diet, more anti-inflammatory supplements. And again, over time, she healed. And I think that's also a testament of the body's ability to heal. And I think nowadays we're so quick to write a prescription or do a surgery, not recognizing that, the body created an issue. Give it time to heal, especially with cancer diagnoses. I feel like the second someone finds, they have cancer, within a month or two, they're already doing treatment without recognizing that cancer took years to form in their body, right? So why not give the body a chance to heal it? So just, yeah, I'm 100% on board with everything that you preach. And again, just words that a lot of people need to hear today.
Yeah, I think if somebody's going to go natural, they need to be all in. I think that's an important mindset and perspective you want to have. And I've known plenty of people who've gotten bad diagnoses and didn't do what the doctor said and ended up with a great result. Now, again, that's not always the case. Sometimes you do want to obviously listen to what your doctor has to say, but. My mom was one of those people. She said she had a very small chance of survival and survived, and doing it all naturally. And my business partner and one of my best friends, Jordan Rubin, was told, you will die in 3 months if you don't do these treatments. And he did a natural treatment. He had testicular cancer and he was completely healed. And so, yeah, I've got numerous examples of that. One of the things that's interesting, and I don't think people fully realize the power of the mind in healing the body. And, if you go back to World War I, there's a practicing physician there, and this is how the placebo effect really, really came about. But he ran out of morphine. And we all know morphine is an incredibly strong painkiller and drug. Well, when he ran out, he said, well, I want to give these fallen soldiers who had lost limbs, the excruciating pain, something to take care of the pain. So he gave them just sugar pills, essentially. And the crazy part was 30 to 40% of them had the exact same amount of pain relief as if they were taking morphine. So
Wow.
Think about that. Your brain, your body can produce very similar chemicals, if not the same as morphine, in terms of killing pain. And so whether somebody's dealing with hypothyroidism or Lyme disease or autoimmunity or whatever it is, your brain is the most important part of you healing and building correct thoughts. And we know this is true. The science today shows the power of the placebo effect and being able to heal. We know the Bible talks about it. Jesus doesn't say, take, this drug or even take this supplement or even eat this food. He says, your faith has healed you, or your beliefs, what you believe, what you think, that has healed you. And so it's really important that we know and understand the power of our mindset and what we become and who we become and how healthy we become.
Absolutely. And also, too, that just reminded me, I mean, there are cases in the Bible, too, where Jesus used natural means to heal people, right? Like with the blind man, he took dirt. Another case, he spat. So I think, there are just so many different ways. But again, he is the center of all healing. But going back to your new book, Dr. Axe, my new favorite book, which I just wrapped up reading the other day, you talk about having a becoming mindset instead of an achieving mindset. And that really resonated with me because I feel like many listeners, myself included, have been wired to be goal oriented, right? We're always seeking the next accomplishment, the next milestone in life, never really taking time to stop and pause for self-assessment on our growth and how we've changed. So I'd love if you could maybe share some tactical steps on how to actually make that mindset transition from achieving to more of becoming.
Yeah, well, first let me share how I learned this. And I was at my grandfather's funeral. I had an amazing grandfather, World War II veteran from the Navy, and just amazing man. And what's one interesting thing about him is when he was in his 40s, after World War II, he went and he started working for the telephone company repairing power lines. And after doing that for 25 years, he said, you know what, this is just not what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so he decided him and my grandmother took their life savings, bought land, a big lake, and they decided to start a campground and a swim park for families. So people would hold retreats there and family reunions. And he did this till he was 96 years old. So I was at his funeral. This is about 7 years ago. And there's a part and I haven't really heard this at many funerals, but a part where the pastor said, does anyone have any final words about Howard? And the person next to me immediately, a man in his 70s, just blurted out in just tears, sobbing, Howard was my best friend. And at first I looked over at him and I thought, I feel a little ashamed to say this, but I looked over at him and I wasn't like, the first thing wasn't compassion. Now it came right after, but I thought, well, I know who my grandfather's best friends are, and that's like my Uncle Alan and Don, like these other. But then I realized, you know what? I'm sure my grandfather was your best friend, because half the people in this room, there's 150 people, whatever. Most of them felt like my grandfather was their best friend. He was that sort of person, and so I realized at the time, like I started thinking about, was my grandfather successful? Because he when he died, they did not have much money. I mean, they just gave so much away, and he was never. Maybe he got one newspaper article written about him because what he did in World War II and some things. But really, I mean, he's very unknown. And I started thinking about people I admired in the past and things I was doing, because I was really going after, how do I accomplish things? That was very much my mindset. How do I write the next book, or reach more people, or grow the clinic, or whatever it is. And I realized something. I thought, you know what, I've got the wrong mindset. I'm focusing on accomplishing. My grandfather, the only thing he ever focused on was becoming more like Christ, becoming more generous, more loving, more wise, and all of those things. And that was really his biggest focus. And at the funeral, nobody talked about what he achieved or accomplished. Nobody. Everybody talked about, wow, Howard was so generous. What was amazing about this funeral was, after the man next to me said that, then so many people started saying, well, Howard saved my marriage, or Howard gave me money when we didn't have any, or Howard led me to the Lord. I mean, just amazing stories. When I was a kid, I would go visit him. They lived about an hour north of us, and I would love it. It was a kid's dream world because they had this big swim park. But
I can imagine.
So once a week he would go. And it was, if you ever want to check it out, it's great. It's still operational. My brother runs it now. It's up in close to Lima, Ohio. It's called Winona Lake, named after my mom. So one of the things my grandfather would always do, once a week, he would volunteer at church and he would go to the hospital and he would just take care of somebody that was sick. So we would go, he'd bring them their favorite meal. He'd sit there and pray with them, talk with them, and I would get to go with him and do this. And it was just such an incredible experience. And you would see, like, you really just got to touch someone's life in such a profound way. And I started thinking about, okay, who was somebody I had admired in the past? And one of those people was Lance Armstrong. Lance Armstrong won 7 Tour de France's. And then for me, having a mom that was a breast cancer survivor, he started this great charity. And the year before that, I think, or so, he had got caught around the exact same time as my grandfather's funeral. He got caught doping and everything started coming out. And I remember just feeling betrayed, like this was, just so wrong. And I remember thinking, like, why did he do this? And one of the things I realized was I read in his book, in an interview, he said this as well. He said, I had a win at all costs mentality. My mindset was win at all costs. Even if I have to lose my family, even if I have to lose my friends, even if I have to cheat, I just have to win at all costs. And I thought that's the definition of a accomplishing mindset, is that no matter what, I'm just trying to accomplish something, versus a becoming mindset's really more about people. It's really more about how do I change someone's life? And it's really moving the focus off of yourself to others. And so rather than just having a to-do list, I encourage people to have a to-be list, being conscious of, because let's say you're going to run an errand that day. Or let's say a customer service call. Like later on today, I've got to change a flight and I'll be calling Delta or Southwest. I'm trying to remember which airline, but I got to call them today to change a flight. Now, listen, I've been on the phone with airlines and gotten pretty frustrated before. And I think that probably a lot of people have. And if I go into my to-do list and I go in that without a becoming mindset, it's going to be like, you know what? I could be mean to the agent. I could be just trying to bully and get my way. Versus if I go and say, no, the most important thing is I will be kind. I will be generous. I will be loving. I will be wise. I will be patient. And I go into that call like that with that spirit and that mindset. It's going to be very, very different if that's my priority over just accomplishing or getting that thing done. And so that is one of the chapters in the book I really go through. Here's how you start to cultivate a becoming mindset versus an accomplishing mindset. And that's one of the biggest principles that's changed my life. I'm very excited about who I'm becoming as I pursue God and as I pursue becoming more virtuous in who I am. And I see, that I've grown so much in my relationship with my wife and my kids and with friends, because this is my primary mindset I have with everybody that I come in contact with.
Yeah. Just curious, Dr. Axe, how old were you when that mindset shift began?
Well, listen, I had a mindset. I don't want to act like at that funeral I was 100% in an accomplishing mindset and zero becoming. I would just say that it was, let's call it 60-40. I still was more I had a lot of a becoming mindset, or maybe 50-50. And I was always like, I've always read personal growth books. Like I've read every John Maxwell book probably,
Yep.
And I've always, I've read a lot of Tony Robbins. I've read a lot of spiritual growth books by A.W. Tozer and C.S. Lewis and some other people I really love and admire. So it's not that I didn't already have that to a degree, but I realized when I was setting goals, what I was really still ultimately my biggest focus was, to a degree, still on accomplishing as much as becoming. And so it was really just more, I need to really shift and make becoming who I become by far the biggest focus of my life. But I would say his funeral was right about, let's see, that would have been 2017. Yeah, about 7 years ago.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm 28 years old, and since listening to your podcast and reading your book, I'm really starting to be more intentional about that shift when I write my goals. And one thing you said in the past that really stuck with me too is, if someone's setting a goal for followers, right? Don't say, I want to have 100,000 followers on Instagram. Rephrase it as, I want to reach 100,000 people. I want to make 100,000 people's lives better. And a simple modification like that really truly does change how you approach the goal. So
Well, yeah, and let me give you an example of that, Jacqueline, for everyone listening, because there's plenty of people today who could say, okay, I want to grow I want to grow my following to 100,000 people on Instagram or 10,000 or whatever the number is for you. But if that's your only goal, that accomplishing goal, then maybe you'd post anything. Maybe you'd post pictures that are scandalous where you're showing too much skin, and so you're corrupting your character in that way, or maybe you're just saying something that's really sensationalized, so in a way you're lying, or maybe you're
Hmm.
posting something that's spreading propaganda just to get likes and hits. Versus if you say, okay, my goal is I want to help 100,000 women um, grow in their self-esteem or feel beautiful, because right now you look at the statistics on Instagram and, and what that does to women between the ages of 15 and 19, high schoolers,
Hmm.
and how I think it's close to 40% of them have taken a self-esteem hit and an identity hit because of self-comparison to others. I mean, the data is very revealing on that. And so my point there is saying, okay, that's a problem in the world. I'm going to go and solve that. Hey, I still want to reach 100,000 people, but I want to help
Yeah.
100,000 women, grow in their identity in Christ or get healthier, build a healthier self-image with their body. And so, yeah, that's an example there.
Yeah. And again, it comes down to providing value. Everything I post now, I say, how does this provide some type of value to whoever is
Yeah.
going to look at it? But going back to John Maxwell, so one of the books I just finished reading was The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. And one of the many brilliant,
By the way, probably my favorite book of his. If not, it's definitely my top three.
really, what's funny? Again, when I listen to your podcast, I take notes on all the books you're reading. So this year I ordered probably 5 or 6 of his books. I'm through 3 of them right now, but he's absolutely incredible. But one of the many brilliant things that he wrote that really stuck with me was his statement that one of the main keys to being successful and fulfilling your purpose is to understand your unique talents and to find the right arena in which to use them.
Mm-hmm.
However, I know that for many people, it might be challenging to really identify what their strengths and gifts are. So, for that group, what advice could you offer them in terms of helping them uncover those talents?
Well, here's what I would say about that. We're living in a society today that's very individualistic. And so I think a lot of times people are like, so here's what I see with Gen Z, okay, and millennials more than I'm probably on that borderline of Gen X and millennial, but I'm a little bit more Gen X. So, when because we live in an individualized society more than a communal society, means that most people are trying to figure it out for themselves. So they're trying to figure it by themselves via social media and maybe a few other people in their life adding some opinions in, and they're kind of, trying to figure out what they're good at. I think that what people need to do is, one, spend time thinking about it and writing it down yourself. Then go to people you really trust who have maybe seen you in certain arenas saying, hey, what do you think I'm good at? If there's any gifts and strengths that I have, what are those? And then ask for your weaknesses as well and embrace those, because what a blessing for someone to tell you what you're weak at, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't grow in an area that you don't know you're weak in. So building up and cultivating that self-awareness is really important. So I would say we need to go to other people, coaches, teachers, pastors, parents, again, mentors, just people that speak into our life, and ask them if somebody knows us fairly well. That's something to think about. Like here's an example. Like I would always ask a mentor of mine, Ben, hey, would you help me if like I'm speaking? If there's something I'm doing, like saying over and over again or doing this, hey, would you point that out? And so he was able to do that for me, which was very helpful. Here's another thing. I learned by doing and trying lots of different things over time, what I was good at and what I was not good at. Most people think, well, I'm just going to figure it out before I do it. For me to do what I'm doing today, which is primarily being a doctor / educator. I'm educating people mostly, and then I'm helping lead my business as an entrepreneur. But really, my biggest role is as educator. I wouldn't have thought that when I was younger, but I decided, well, I thought at one point, well, I want to be a doctor. Okay, well, maybe the sort of doctor I want to be is a physical therapist. Okay, well, it's not a physical therapist. Well, maybe it's maybe it's actually a nutritionist. Well, okay, well, let me go into chiropractic because they can do nutrition and chiropractic and physical therapy. And then I have a license to do a lot of different things and functional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, hey, I want to run a clinic full time. But then I realized my favorite part of running my clinic was when I did my lectures. I would hold big lectures in my clinic. And then they got so big that I started holding them in places like churches and buildings and things like that. And then I started a radio show. And then and then I started a YouTube show. And then I started something. My point is, I tried a lot of things. And now I only said the things that sort of led me to the next. There were other things I tried and I thought, this isn't working. I don't want to do this. But I think you really need to dive in and be willing to, like, let me tell you some advice I have for my brother-in-law who's 26 years old. His name's Noah. He's a great guy. And I have told him, I said, Noah, listen, do not worry about making money in your 20s. Have your biggest focus on learning. If you can get, rather than going for a job where you can learn the most, where you can make the most possible, get in jobs where you can learn the most possible. So I've tried to set up internships for him and set up things where he can go and learn and grow under people that are really amazing clinicians and marketers, because he wants to actually help grow and build functional medicine clinics more as an entrepreneur,
awesome.
an investor. So, but my point is that I think most people in their 20s, it's what can I make the most money doing? No, what can you learn the most doing, and do that in your 20s?
100%. And I think too, sadly, at least from what I observed, even in myself, is the fear of failure often prevents us from trying something. Example right here with this podcast. Dr. Axe, this is like my 50th episode that I'm recording with you right now. And I cringe when I look back and I hear the first 10, 15 episodes I recorded, but I didn't let that stop me, right? I learned from failure. I learned from my mistakes. And obviously 200-300 episodes from now, hopefully I'll be in a much better place. But I think that we really need to embrace making those mistakes and the potential to fail, because we all will, right? All the greats have at one point in time. And to really not let that be the reason we don't start.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. The best way to get better is to repetition. And then it's not just repetition. It's repetition where you are focused on getting better every episode. So watching your old episodes, watching and listening to people that are great at doing podcasts, everyone from whether it's Joe Rogan or a Jordan Peterson or a Mel Robbins or whoever, I think that's that's how you grow and get better.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back though to discovering talents, are you a fan of personality tests? There's so many out there, like Myers-Briggs, Enneagram. What's your take on those?
Yeah, so generally I am. In one thing, one of my biggest areas of study has been ancient forms of medicine, like Chinese medicine, and they really had the first personality test. Unless there's an argument that Ayurveda maybe was before, but either way. So Ayurveda has the doshas. Chinese medicine has what are called the 5 elements. Yeah. And within those, that's really a personality. If you look at specifically the Chinese medicine, that's a personality profile. But they not only linked it to your personality, they went way deeper and said, well, this is also tied to an organ system and is tied to emotions and is tied to numerous things. And so I'm generally a fan. Now, let me tell you what I don't like about it's not the personality profile. What I don't like about the way some people respond to them is saying, well, I'm just like this. Yep. And they use it as an excuse not to change and grow. So that's not, that's not good. And I've seen some people kind of say, well, we shouldn't have personality profiles because, you're identifying yourself as something that's not, I don't know. I saw one Christian say this biblical, and it just wasn't very. It was a very unwise comment. They didn't know what they were talking about. But all that being said, I do like them a lot from the standpoint of like for instance, Chelsea and we took the Enneagram test. I just went on whoever has. I'm trying to remember his name now, but the founder of Enneagram. I just went on his podcast. And I shared with him that, my wife and I really liked it because we joke around about it. She knows I'm an 8-7. I know she's a 3-2. So for her, she's highly competitive. So everything we do all the time, trying to play board game, or anything with my wife. I mean, she is in competitive. And I was joking around, like our daughter, who's just turned 4, I mean, she runs around the house. She has to win. I mean, at everything constantly. I'm like, we've got a little 3 here. And so, but it was good for us to get to know each other. Like, oh, you tick this way. Oh, you tick this way. So my wife is very competitive, yet very supportive, in that way. And I'm very direct and challenging, yet also very, want connection with others in a deep way, and to have, and so I do like them. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's where most of the benefit lies, is when you're either in some type of intimate relationship or even in a group setting where they're most helpful. So, freshman year of college, I went to a school called Babson. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Dr. Axe.
I've heard it, but I don't know much about it.
Yeah. It's a small business school. They're known for entrepreneurship right outside Boston, and part of their curriculum for freshman students is a course called FME, which stands for Foundations in Management and Entrepreneurship. And during this class, they basically split the class into 2 groups, and your goal is to create a product and sell it and make as much money as you can while still maintaining good relationships with your team. And half of that class consisted of a behavioral component where we took a test called the DISC assessment, which I'm sure you've heard of before.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. But that was my first exposure to personality tests. And I learned a lot about myself, not only from the test, but just my interactions with the people in the group. Because outside of friendships, growing up, I mean, that was the first situation where I had to manage people, right? So just dealing in a business setting when we're all trying to attain a certain goal. So it was a really interesting experience. I'd probably say the behavioral component of that class was perhaps more beneficial than like the tactical accounting finance part. But I'm a fan of the DISC assessment. Enneagram I've taken twice, and interestingly, I've gotten different results on different tests. So I think I need to go to the actual source and retake it. But I do think they have a place, and they can be very beneficial.
Yeah, we use DISC at my organizations, and so that's the one we use professionally most commonly. So yeah, and that was the first one I really actually Myers-Briggs was the first one I did. I think I'm an INTJ, but DISC, I was a DI. I'm pretty familiar with those two.
Yeah, interesting. So on the opposite side of the spectrum, Dr. Axe, let's say someone knows what they are called to do. They know their God-given purpose, but they don't necessarily feel ready to pursue it. I reposted a quote the other day on my Instagram that said, when it feels scary to jump, that is exactly when you jump. Otherwise, you'll end up staying in the same place your entire life. So I guess my question for you is, how do we discern when it's the right time to take a step of faith into an area that we feel called to pursue?
Well, let me share the way that I think about it. I think that, I'm very focused on having a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. And so like if I'm standing here, most people think about, okay, how far can I get in the next few days or months or maybe even a year? I'm really focused on the next 10 years or next 25 years. More so. Now I have those broken down into goals. So like as a business, we have quarterly goals and then a yearly goal and then a 3 and a 5 year plan. So we definitely have that. But also if I'm sitting, let me give you an example of this. My brother-in-law had a really great paying job, but it just really allowed him to have no freedom. He had to travel a lot. And with having kids now, he's like, well, I want to do something, or in the near future, he really decided he wanted to be able to have more freedom. Mm-hmm. And so he had to weigh becoming a nurse practitioner, which would give him lots of freedom to operate medically, start a clinic, do all kinds of things. But it would take him 2 full years of not working at all. So he's going to have a couple $100 salary, just, he's not going to get paid. So if he's only looking at the next 3 years, he's losing out. That's not a good decision. If he looks though at 10 years, okay, well now he beat those, he's going to make more and have more freedom. And that's not even counting 25 years from now in his quality of life and all those things. So I think really you've got to be able to count the costs. You need to understand trade-offs and say, okay, and invest in the future. in that way. I think also, um, this is, this sometimes it could happen where, hey, if you go too early, it could hurt you. I mean, so you need to weigh if that's reality or not. But I think generally speaking, that's how I make every decision. Is I really kind of sit down and I say, okay, there's two paths. I could do this or this. Okay, where will I be in 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year if I follow both of the paths based on my calculations, based on Murphy's Law? Not everything goes perfect, but generally good. Okay, what would that look like? And then, of course, there's the wisdom of being prayerful, asking the
Mm-hmm.
wise people around you what they think they should do. And not, listen, you want to ask people, hey, maybe it's your parents, maybe it's not your parents, maybe it's maybe it's a, here's the thing. You want to ask somebody who has done what you want to do or who's very wise in that arena, because they're going to be able to share some wisdom with you. But you need to listen to God. You need to listen
Yep.
to your own intuition. You need to listen to the wise counsel around you. And then you need to count the costs of both paths in order to make the right decision.
Yeah. No, I love that. Going back to the topic of beliefs, I've heard you talk a lot about limiting beliefs, right? Which are basically these thoughts that we believe to be absolute truths that often tend to stop us from doing certain things,
Yeah.
e.g., leaving your job or taking that step of faith. And I heard on one of your recent episodes, what was his name? I think it was with John Acuff, that
Mm-hmm.
the best way to identify limiting beliefs is to write down some of your biggest goals and then observe the first few thoughts that come into mind when you start to talk yourself out of it.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that. I did that exercise right after that episode. And after doing a bit more reading on the power that these limiting beliefs have on our outlook of not only ourselves, but the world, I really started to question the root of many of these limiting beliefs that I have that I've carried throughout my life, many of which started in childhood, which is the case for most people.
Yeah.
And you have a pretty profound story where one of your teachers said some pretty harsh words to you, I think when you were in high school.
Yeah.
That contributed to the formation of a limiting belief that you had, but you were able to overcome that, and that has clearly made all the difference. So I'd love if you could share that story, because I think it's one of the most profound stories I've ever heard.
Yeah, this was a turning point in my life. You know how all of us have these sort of some turning points. I did this the other day, by the way. This is a fun exercise for everybody to do, and I think an enlightening one. Write down, what are the top 10 turning points of your life. Now, if you have 8 or 12, that's fine too. It could go one, but generally, what are the 10 biggest turning points of your life, or 15? Write those down. And so I was doing this, and I realized, so going back, and I'll share this story. And I think, by the way, everyone's going to resonate with this, because most of you have had this happen to you in some way, shape, or form. So when I was a freshman in high school, I was not a very good student, and I was in freshman English class, and I had a teacher. Her name was Miss Noble, and she after the bell rang, she said, "Josh, can you stay after class?" And I stayed after class, and she said, "Hey, Josh, what do you want to do after high school?" And I said, "Well, I actually really want to be a doctor." And I knew that because the year before, my mom had gone through breast cancer and chemotherapy. And I remember my mom suffering and saying, "I want to help people like my mom." And so I said, "I want to be a doctor," with total confidence. Well, she laughed out loud. And she said, "Josh, listen, with your GPA, you'd never get into med school." She said, "My own daughter had a 3.8 GPA and barely got into med school." She said, "You're getting a D- right now in my class. You got an F on this paper." She said, "If you're even going to graduate, you're going to need to try harder." And that was it. And I walked out of there. Now, my takeaway from that, I kind of walked out of there thinking, well, maybe I can't be a doctor. So I kind of like almost just left that dream completely. And then 2.5 weeks later, my mom brings me in to see a physician who diagnoses me with ADHD. And he talks about me like I'm not in the room. I still remember him talking and him saying, "Listen, your son has a learning disability. He has severe ADHD, and he's always going to have trouble, trouble learning. And here's a prescription for a drug, Ritalin." And now my mom never put me on the medication. She never felt right about it. But I went through high school after within a few weeks of hearing a teacher say that to me. And then basically I felt like, well, not only am I not smart, I'm like medically not smart. There's something wrong with me. So I thought, well, it's just not in the cards for me to get good grades. And so I just barely made it through high school. I barely graduated. I graduated with a C minus GPA. The only reason I graduated I knew my dad would just be irate if I didn't graduate high school. And that was my biggest motivation. And then I applied to a bunch of colleges, got denied by a lot. But there was one school I really wanted to go to, and they sent me a letter back, and it said this. It was University of Kentucky. It said, basically, now listen, I don't remember the exact verbiage, but it was here's what I took away. You're not in, but if you come and take summer school and you average above a 3.0, we'll let you in.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, well, good. Okay, I'm going to go, and I'm going to really try. And so my parents let me go. I went to summer school. First class I had to take was English 101. First big assignment was a paper. So I wrote this paper, really tried, turned it in. A few days later, the teacher, Mrs. Williams, says, Josh, can you stay after class? And my stomach just sunk. I thought, oh no.
Not again.
I failed. Not good. And she said, Josh, what's your major? And I said, I haven't chosen one. And she said, well, I want to let you know, I really think you should consider being an English major or journalism major. She said, because you got the highest grade in the class. You did a great job on this paper. I think you're a really gifted writer. Great work. And I walked out of there and it was just, here's what it was like for me. It was like having an organ transplant. Now we'll call it a mindset transplant. I went from believing I wasn't smart, I had a learning disability, I was going to struggle in school, to then finally having a teacher tell me, you got the highest grade in the class. You're a gifted writer. Hey, I'm going to even tell you what your career should be. And so I almost changed to being a writer. And then by the end of the first year, though, I thought, no, I still want to be a doctor. And I averaged well above, 3 point something, and graduated eventually much later on. But I went to Johns Hopkins University. I averaged a 3.9 GPA at Johns Hopkins, and so and became a doctor. Started a supplement company. I've written 7 books. I don't say any of that to boast. I say all of it to say, if I would have held on to that one single limiting belief, none of that would have happened. None of it. And there are so many people today listening to this or watching this that you have a limiting belief and it's keeping you from fulfilling your dreams. Like you're not writing the book yourself, or you're not changing your career, or you're not taking the risk, or you're not taking control of your health because at some point, someone said something to you and you believe the lie. And so it's so important that we identify the lie. Biblically speaking, God says, take every thought captive. Is this true? Does it line up with the word of God? If not, then it's a lie. And so we know that. And I saw this a lot medically, by the way. You know how many patients I had come into me after seeing other physicians, and they came in and they said, well, Dr. Axe, I'm here to see you, but my doctor told me I had to be on this pill the rest of my life. Or they told me my condition is irreversible. Things like type 2 diabetes, or even high cholesterol, or high blood pressure, or autoimmune disease. And I helped thousands of people reverse those conditions. And again, it was all because they overcame the limiting belief. I told them a few things to eat differently and do with their life, and they did them. And so they were able to heal completely. So this really is one of the most important principles throughout the book that I get into is here is how to overcome the limiting beliefs. And so but it's a huge thing. I think if I think about the biggest thing holding people back today, it's limiting beliefs about themselves, about others, about God, about the world. Because here's another one. If you don't believe the right things about God, it's going to affect your relationship with him. If you believe like some people believe, there are kids that believe they're cats. There are some people, like a lot of the people trying to run the world, and I'm not getting into things that are kind of out there, but just sharing reality that, they'll say that humans are viruses and like pests to the planet. And so, my point there is that's a limiting belief about humans, because the true belief is we're divine beings. Like C.S. Lewis talks about this in his book. And he says, if we were to see one another in our spiritual forms as God and goddesses, we would be, with little g's, we would be blown away and stunned and in awe and wonder. And so limiting beliefs, here's the thing, if you're following a lie, it's going to lead you to a bad place. And that's the reality. And if you're believing a lie about yourself, you're not gifted, you're not smart, you're not beautiful, whatever lie you're believing, it's gonna hurt your life in some way. And so it's important that we find and create new empowering beliefs.
Absolutely. Amen to all of that. And I mean, you talk about this too in your book, but that all links to identity, right?
Yeah.
Who are we?
Yeah.
And again, one thing I really love that you talk about a lot is what are we putting our identity in? Is it our accomplishments? Is it our assets, material, how much money we make every year, or even our relationships? But your identity first is, you're a child of God and you have inherent value in that because he created you and you are loved. Anything beyond that is a gift from him. And I think today, again, like, not to get political, but there's a lot of people saying, oh, like, voice your truth. What's your truth? And there is one truth, right? That is God's
Yeah.
word. And if we just focus on that, I mean, the spillover effects of that truth in terms of overcoming limiting beliefs, recognizing our identity, who we are, our intrinsic value. I mean, it's incredible the change that it has and the impact that it has.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Well, I touched on this before too, Dr. Ox, briefly, but when it comes to failure, you've spoken to some incredible people on your show. What separates people who thrive from those who merely survive when it comes to really big setbacks they've experienced?
Hmm. You know, I think it's our focus, what we're focused on. You know, when I think about Christ and what he did on the cross, he had his eyes fixed on the prize. Us, which is amazing. That's incredible. Versus if he had his eyes only fixed on the pain, and that's where his focus was, that becomes very hard. I mean, this is true with everyone, by the way. I mean, so when I had this spinal infection, I didn't walk for a year. I had somebody come in to visit me and they said, "What have you been doing?" And I said, "Well, I've been writing a book and doing this with my 2-year-old daughter and all the things I'd been doing." And he said, "Well, if I were you, I would just be eating Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew all day because I would be depressed knowing that that you might not walk again." And I said, "Well, you know what? I've got a lot of purpose and I've got my eyes fixed on eternity. I've got my eyes fixed on, I want to maximize my time here." And so I think this is true with everybody. What are your eyes fixed on? Is it fixed on yourself and your condition, your disease? Or is it focused on, no, I'm going to get to the point where I'm back throwing my 2-year-old in the pool again? Or I'm going to bring my kids to Disney World. This is how my mom, partly how my mom beat cancer, is we didn't focus on cancer.
Yeah.
She focused on, I want to bring my grandkids to Disney World when I'm in my 70s and 80s and 90s. And she focused on that and said, okay, well, let's just eat and let's focus on that beautiful future ahead of you. And so most people have their eyes fixed on the wrong things. Here's an example. There was quite a few psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists now who have said one of the biggest issues for Gen Z right now is that they're ruminating on their thoughts. Even when they go to counseling, it's like the number of kids going to counseling and talking about their problems over and over and over again, actually most of the time makes it worse.
Yep.
Because they're just recirculating and focusing on their problems. I notice this with patients. Listen, I'm thinking about like a lot of patients. Yeah, I'm thinking about one right now that had Lyme disease, another one that had fibromyalgia, another one that had chronic fatigue. And the only thing they focus on is their condition. Now, listen, I'm sensitive to the fact that that's incredibly painful and debilitating and your energy is gone. And that makes certain things in life very difficult. But if you want to heal, you can't live in that state and just focus on those things. You've got to focus on your future and healing and so your focus is very important. And also, when you look at the studies on depression versus joy in life and somebody being happy with their life, the depressed group is the group that's the most self-focused. I'm going to take care of myself and my needs and me and me and me and me, whatever. Everybody needs to accommodate to me, versus the people that are the happiest are the people that are most focused on others. Think about Mother Teresa. She was in the slums in Calcutta, India. I mean, the dirtiest place in the world. And yet she was one of the most joyful people in the world. And why is that? Because she was not focused on self at all, focused mostly on others. Now, we want to care for ourselves in order that we can care for others. But I think that, but really the people that thrive versus don't, it's the people that thrive are the people that focus on serving others. And have their eye more fixed on the eternal, more of the long term. I cover this in my book. The people here's a quote by C.S. Lewis. This isn't word for word, but generally, I think he said something to the degree of the people that do the most in this life are the people that think most about the next life.
Yep.
you think about everyone from Moses to, to Jesus, to Gandhi, to Mother Teresa, to Abraham Lincoln, to Michelangelo. I mean, these people were very focused on eternity, and that's why they did the work they were, the type of work. I mean, that's why, I mean, if you go and look at the Sistine Chapel today, it's mind blowing. Or the statues that he created, Michelangelo.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, you're in awe. If I would go and look at a modern day artist, 99% of them, even the best of the best today, who's ever known in the modern world as being a great artist, you'd be like, that just looks stupid. I know that just is politically incorrect for me to say, but it's all meaningless because it's void of the divine. And so my point there is that it's very, the people that thrive are the people that focus the most on the long term and not the short term, and most on others and not themselves.
Absolutely. And to that point too, I mean, even Michelangelo had a becoming mindset rather than accomplish, in the sense that he started that project with knowing that he would not be there to see it finished.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah. So a lot of similarities. And you have this awesome section in your book too that includes a table of the characteristics of characters in a story. And I actually screenshot it and I have it printed right now. But it's a wonderful illustration from the victim to the villain to the hero to the guide. And you say how heroes use pain, but villains are used by it. What, in your opinion, Dr. Axe, would contribute to someone's choosing one of those paths over the other? Because we hear stories too of people who grow up with, parents who are alcoholics, and one child goes in a similar route and the other child makes a 360. Like, what inherently would impact that person's decision as to what route they pursue?
Well, I think ultimately it comes down to people are always trying to avoid pain and create pleasure for themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how it should be in a way. It's only like, for me, I still go through a hard workout because I know there's more pleasure on the back end. Where some people are focused more on the pain during the exercise and not worried enough on the back end. And so that's really the only difference, period, of why somebody would work out or not work out, or eat healthy or not eat healthy, is it's where are you focused on the pain at? On the front or the back end? You want to pay it on the front, not the back. And so with those people, though, you look at, again, an example of a movie that most people modern day would know would be a movie like Harry Potter. And there's loads of others. But just as an example, you've got both of them are orphans, Voldemort and Harry. Both of them were really, put through a difficult time in their life. And Harry decides to take the pain that he has and say, you know what? I want to help others relieve this pain. And that relieves his own pain. Where Voldemort says, well, I'm going to take this pain that was inflicted upon me and inflict it upon others. And in a way, it's going to give me, and actually a lot of this is hormonal. Actually, it's a sort of, there's dopamine hits, there's serotonin, there's oxytocin, and what sort of hit you get from each different one. And so you give example. I mean, somebody could go and get a hit of drugs and have a certain type of experience chemically. And somebody could go to a praise and worship night at church and just sing at the top of their lungs and be engrossed in the music and have a different type of experience. But both are going to have really tremendous amounts of joy, but the one is going to lead to heaven and the other is going to, listen, metaphorically, or a hellish state, and one's going to lead to a more heavenly state of your life. And so I think that in terms of getting to the exact psychology of why somebody, I think a lot of it is learned behavior. I saw my parents doing this, and so I'm going to do this. And, outside of that, I don't know that I can answer it. I just know that I think that it still comes down to almost the answer before. It's somebody is focused on the short term. Another person is focused more on the long term.
Absolutely. And the people in your life too. I love the purpose of the guide. I mean, in the book too, like, the guide is someone who makes the hero realize their full potential, right? And sheds light on things that they have deep within them that they may not have otherwise have ever realized.
I'll tell you this. One of the biggest things that most people are missing in life right now, across the board, we're talking about Gen Z and millennial. Now, this is everybody, but especially people that are younger. people are missing their Gandalf, their Yoda,
Mm-hmm.
their coach Nick Saban, their mentor, their guru. And if you look at the Eastern world throughout history, whether you study, Judaism and in the structure of rabbis, or early Christianity or others, this idea of being a mentee or a disciple in those ways. Most people, again, one of your other questions is people try and figure out themselves rather than say, no, who is somebody that I could latch a hold of, that I could learn from. And, here's another example. When I was in high school, I always went to I always went to church, but then I always went to Sunday school. I bet almost every church had Sunday school years ago, like 30 years ago. Now almost none do.
Yep.
Now, the reason I bring that up is one is a lot more small group focused. One is a lot more mentor focused. And then from there, Sunday school, then we would get put in small groups that I go to on Wednesday night, where I always had someone older than me that was leading me. Always in my life. And I was so blessed by that. And a lot of young people do not have anyone to help lead them in their life. So they're guessing everything. And so it creates an unstable identity. It creates anxiety, mental health disorders, creates them to waste their time and not move far ahead as quickly as they should be in life. And so the fastest way to move ahead faster in your life and to flourish is to find someone to model. Find your rabbi, find your priest, find your pastor, find your coach, find your mentor, find that person to help you grow and lead life. I always have somebody I'm following in that way. Always. Yeah. And I try and do it both online via someone like a John Maxwell. And I always try and do it in person with someone. I had Ben Lerner early on, and Greg Loman and Chuck Majors and Dan Yachter, these doctors. And then I had Jordan Rubin, and now he's my best friend, but he was a mentor. And, early I had my grandfather and my dad. And then I had Larry Kirk, this man at church. And then I had Mike Zeller and Anthony Humphrey. Like, I could name all these people that helped me grow because I knew this principle. I realized this early in my life. I think even in high school, I need to get connected to people that are ahead of me because that will help me grow the fastest in trying to become. And this is going back to the becoming mindset. Rather than trying to accomplish things, trying to become like somebody great. It's the fastest way for you to excel.
Absolutely. No, that's so important. And one thing you highlighted, so I do just want to emphasize too that because I am in the process too right now where I would love to be able to work one-on-one with a mentor, like via like in person or on Zoom. But for those folks out there who might not be in that position, John Maxwell can be your mentor, right? You just listen to all of the information he's put out, his podcast, read all of his books. It doesn't necessarily have to be that one-on-one interaction. Would that be ideal? Yes, but there's always information out there.
Well, and here's how this should look, okay? So, and let me tell a quick story. This was when I was probably my first year of practice, okay? So nobody knew who I was. I didn't have anything out. I was just getting started. Well, I started listening to Dave Ramsey, okay? And he was really well known in the Nashville area. If you don't know, Dave's a big financial guru. And I went to this event he did. I went to a mastermind event he did in Cancun. And when I was there, I was able to go up and ask him a question. I said, Dave, hey, could you mentor me? So I asked him that point blank. And he said, Josh, I am so honored that you would ask, but no, I do not. I don't have the time to do that. And but I thought, hey, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try it. And now that I'm in the position I am in life, I really get it even more so. But I decided I'm going to keep learning from Dave. I'm going to go to his events. I'm going to read his books, and similar thing with John Maxwell. I got to talk to John Maxwell once and was able to learn from him in some great ways at a distance. But I think it's important for people to have both mentors that you're not in contact with and also those that you are. The mentors you're not in contact with, maybe the people that are very well known, again, the John Maxwells, the Dave Ramseys, the Craig Groeschels, the Lisa Bevere's, the Sadie Robertson, those sort of people, or the doctors, the Andrew Hubermans, the whoever's, like learn from those people from afar, read everything they do, but also, go to your local church and join a small group and have someone who's a little bit ahead of you spiritually, right? I mean, talk to a friend of a friend, find an entrepreneur, some old sage, that's, or male or female, that can help, disciple you in your business career. Right. I did that to a really great degree. So I would say try and have both of those.
Right. And to the point about an in-person mentor, circling back on our initial conversation, that person will help you identify things that you need to improve upon, areas
That's
of
right.
growth, right? You can't necessarily get that with someone who you're just listening to. So couldn't agree more with that. Recognizing that we have a few minutes left, Dr. Axe, I want to be conscious of your time, but I did have a few more questions for you. You have built so many successful companies, and I am curious, what was your method of figuring out what you wanted to explore and invest in next? So I have so many ideas of where I want to take Well and Strong, but I'm also trying to be wise and homing in on one focus area, at least initially, because as they say, if you're chasing two rabbits, you're not going to catch either one. So do you have any advice in terms of a method for me to perhaps use to really discern and narrow in on a focus area?
Well, first off, Confucius was right on the two rabbits. So that's, you will catch none. And I've had at points where I've tried to chase two and it didn't work out. So I totally agree with that. So here's how I think about it. What can you be the best in the world at? And what are you passionate about? And what's the current opportunity you have? And then fourth, what can you get rewarded doing? Okay. Those are the four things to consider. Now, I think it's Ikigai. That's what it's called in Japanese, but many people have done this framework. Maxwell has the same framework that he learned from somebody. So this has been, people have learned this for a long time, but that's what I would say is, for instance, what can you say, I know I can get better and better and better and better at this. And can I monetize it? Mm-hmm. Okay. That's really how you want to think about it. And also, okay, maybe there's stages. So let me give you an example of this. When I started a functional medicine clinic, and I loved seeing patients, but I loved even more educating and teaching. Now, again, running a full-time practice, it brought in a good income, but the biggest thing for me was following my passion. I believed I could be one of the best in the world at, at doing a radio show and YouTube videos and podcast, just being an educator. And so I said, I want to move into that. And so what I did was, over time, I said, okay, I'm going to do 4 days a week in my clinic, and 1 full day a week, I'm just going to create content. And I started writing articles on a website called draxe.com and doing 1 YouTube video a week and then a radio show a week. And so I would do all that on Friday. And over time, it just continued to grow and snowball to where finally one day it made sense for me to just full-time do draxe.com. And then it was like, well, how am I going to monetize that? Well, I'm going to create courses to help people heal. I created a course called the Dr. Axe Detox, and another one for healing leaky gut, and then an essential oil program, and a number of other health programs to help people heal. And then over time, well, these people could also benefit from supplements. So then I started a supplement line. And so oftentimes, if you think about it, it makes sense for you to maybe build your audience and grow your business in one way, and then add other things as you continue to grow that are going to really help bless and benefit the audience you're called to serve. And so I hope that's helpful, but I definitely think you really have to think about what you can be the best in the world at first. Secondarily, what can you be rewarded? How can you be rewarded in doing that?
I love that. Thank you. No, that was very helpful. I'll apply that framework and keep you posted on what that ends up being.
Great. Would love to hear.
And Dr. Axe, so where can listeners find you and get a copy of your latest book, Think This, Not That?
Yeah. Well, first, again, I have a podcast. It's called the Dr. Josh Axe Show. It's really growing. We're one of the top on iTunes in the health section. And I cover a lot of health. So if you have a hypothyroid or Lyme or want to know about saunas or cold plunge or anything, I'm really diving deep there into those topics, along with how to grow in mindset and purpose. So it's about 50% all health content, 50% other, how to grow in your life content. So Dr. Josh Axe Show on YouTube and iTunes. The book is called Think This, Not That. It's in bookstores nationwide, on Amazon as well. And I really think it's the best book I've written. I really think it would help bless people's lives. And on social media, my handle is at Dr. Josh Axe.
Wonderful. I will be including the links to all of those in the show notes. And I will say, Dr. Axe, my mom and I are probably your top 2 fans on your podcast. Anytime a new episode drops, I'm texting her. I'm like, Mom, listen to this. But it's truly my favorite podcast. I share it on Well and Strong all the time. So just keep up the great work.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jacqueline. I'm praying you're blessed in your career and all you do. You're doing a great job. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Axe. And one last question for you. And this is my favorite one to ask. And that is, what does being well and strong mean to you?
Well, I think it's being strong in body, mind, and spirit. Oftentimes somebody can be strong physically, but if you're weak spiritually and mentally, your life can start to crumble. So for me, primarily, it's being strong spiritually, and then mentally, and then physically. And so really focusing on all those areas. One way I do that is I try and win the morning and win the day. Mm-hmm. And so every morning I start off with, I wake up and I get on my hands and knees first thing for a minute and just say, just pray. And then I'll go for a quick walk of just, gratitude, get outside it for a minute. And then I'll come back in, read my Bible for a little bit, and then I'll have a superfood smoothie. Then I'll work out. So I'm really focused on growing my health, growing spiritually. And then right after that, I typically see my wife and daughters and, lots of kisses and hugs and good mornings. And for about 30 minutes before I dive into my work. But I would just say really being well is really, even if you look up in the dictionary, it's health and body, mind, and spirit. To all those areas.
Amen. Sounds like the perfect morning routine. Well, Dr. Axe, thank you so much again for your time. I'm super excited to share this with listeners, and I hope to have you on again at some point soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know you're going to be a big success, so thanks again.
Thanks, Dr. Axe.
All right. God bless, Jacqueline.